Now, a decision on MP pay is due earlier this year. The process is decided by an independent body called IPSA, although that hasn't stopped politicians weighing in. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, for his part, has urged restraint from IPSA, while Sir Keir Starmer has said that MPs do not need a pay rise, and we should all be saying that we don't need that pay rise and shouldn't go ahead. The Labour leader continued, the mechanism is independent, but I think for me, as leader of the opposition, it's on me to say I do not think we should have a pay rise. Now, the expectation is that MP salaries will rise by over £2,000 this year, in line with how public sector salaries have risen also by 2.7%. Well, let's discuss this now, the merits or potentially demerits of paying MPs more at such a time of cost of living squeeze. Joining me now is Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society. Welcome to the programme, Sam. Should MPs be paid more, particularly at this time?
Morning, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I've been an advocate for paying MPs rather substantially more for a while now, and I think as you say, people have this idea that the cost of living is going up, tax revenues are squeezed, the government's spending a lot, so it's a great time to make savings, and that MPs are a good place to make that. Actually, that's sort of the opposite of the actual situation. And the worse things are, the more it is that you want to keep talent in the role and attract talent towards it. And Parliament actually doesn't cost us very much at all. Particularly when you think about it, you have 650 MPs, so a pay rise for them of £3,000 is not going to be very much compared to, say, the budget of the NHS, which is well over 100 billion a year. And these people make incredibly important decisions, as we were just discussing with the first lockdown. But if you were able to attract more talented people into this job, retain them there, and get, say, an absolutely marginal improvement in economic performance as a result, so lifting average earnings up by about 0.14%, you could pay your MPs £1 million a year, and you'd still raise enough tax revenue to cover that bill and leave everyone else better off.
Now, that's a really interesting argument, that if you had more productive MPs, higher GDP, they'd pay for themselves even if you paid them some ridiculous wage. But many people will think that paying MPs more in the middle of a term isn't going to change the quality of those MPs in that building. Paying MPs £2,000 more this year than they already earn, which is an astonishingly high wage, the top 5% of wages in this country, that's not going to change a jot about the people who are currently in that building.
I think that's a really good point as well. And it kind of comes down to the fact that sometimes in order to make a change and to attract sort of quality into something, you are going to have to, as much as it may stick in the craw, you're going to have to sit there and say, well, actually, we may have to overpay one or two members now, so that when the next election cycle comes around and people make the decision whether they're going to run for an MP, which takes a lot of time, a lot of money, it's very stressful. And you have these people who are, for instance, let's say they're a high-performing GP or a lawyer or a banker or an economist, and they have skills which would be useful. So they have a sense of how the NHS works, they know how the financial system works, they know, they have good quantitative skills. You have to remember a really substantial number of our MPs can't tell you correctly what would happen if you flipped the coin twice, what the probability of getting two heads would be. If you want to attract people with sort of quantitative skills into this role, you are going to have to make it worth for them to do it. And just starting by saying, well, actually, if you run for this and you get this job, you aren't going to take a significant decrease in your quality of living is probably a good place to do.
Well, Sam Ashworth-Hayes, it's a view. I'm not sure it's one that's shared by a particularly large proportion of the public, although I do always find in this conversation that that IPSA, this independent body that sets the pay, was set up so that we wouldn't have conversations like these, so that the power was taken out of MPs' hands. And MPs always comment on it anyway. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have.